Welcome back to Social Impact Live. Welcome back to a new series on ego and social impact. I'm your host, Darrell Coleman, and we're going to dive right into this series focused on how ego and social impact come together and affect the outcomes that we're able to create in the world, but also in many ways affect who we are and who we become as people. So recently I was reading a book. I'm reading a book called Polishing the Mirror by Ram Dass, and it's an interesting book as it looks into some of the different religious frames that exist across the world and how those different, in some ways, religious viewpoints carry forward similar contexts, similar viewpoints. And one thing that I was reading the other day really resonated with me, and it was ultimately about this concept of ego. You see, as people in the modern world, our egos are on full display. And just to define what that term means real quick, ego is a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. And I placed that down there at the bottom of the screen to remind us throughout this video and perhaps this whole video series of what that really means. So a person's sense of self-esteem and self-importance, that concept is on full display in our current society. It's something that we focus on intensely. We're really interested in making sure that the world knows who we are, what we've done, and we project that out into the world in a number of different ways, whether that's our Instagram channel or our YouTube channel or wherever else it might be that we are in the public sphere. We are accumulating and building on an image of ourselves that we allow the world to see. When I was a kid, I think that I was really into my ego in a lot of ways. It was something that drove me in so many different aspects of my life. It was something that I tapped into, identified with in a lot of ways. And I think, as I'll talk about in this series, that there are elements of ego, of our sense of self-esteem and self-importance, that are important for us to cultivate and maintain. But what happened for me as a child is that I was actually someone people referred to as cocky, right, or arrogant at times. I didn't view it that way, but I do understand why they view it that way now. But it got so much to the point where I joked that I would write a book one day called "They Called Me Cocky: The Darrell Coleman Success Story." As I've progressed, as I've grown up, it's actually become quite an ironic title, I think, because so much of what I want to do in the world is attribute who I am and where I've gotten to other people. But I think it's an important point to touch in on, is this idea that ego has the ability to reflect back, right, and to create some sort of image of who we are for the world. That becomes our focus and our desire. As we enter the world of creating social impact and we think about what that looks like, we have to think about how our ego shows up and what it's doing to our ability to create change in the world. This book that I was reading, back to that, right, was referring to this concept of somebodyness, this idea that each of us is trying to become somebody. We put it on business cards and we say, hey, I'm somebody, and look, here's what I do as somebody, and look at all the things that I've done. And we put those things out there as a way of moving through the world, and at some point we get to the point where we say, wow, I've really made it. Look at me. I'm somebody now, right, in the eyes of this person or that person over there. But often when we get to that point, we end up feeling somewhat hollow. We end up feeling like we haven't really accomplished something. Maybe we post that picture on Instagram and we feel like we haven't actually attained what we want to attain. We're just putting up a facade in some way. For a few years ago, as I was sort of ruminating on this concept of ego in and of itself, or maybe I was ruminating on social media and the world that we live in that requires this self-projection all the time, I realized that I didn't feel comfortable with the projection of self. Right? I realized that there was a person, there was a me who was sitting there operating a projector. And I would walk into somebody on the street and I would put up the projector screen and they'd be like, how's it going? I'd be like, oh, check, right? My personal relationships are going great. My business life is going great. Yeah, my family back home, yep, they're doing this. And I had these talking points that I could pull from, right, to show an image on the screen. But the reality is that the nuanced version of me, the true me, the guy who was sitting in the back operating the projector, that guy had a far more complex answer to those questions, a far more complex relationship, and at times was projecting elements of truth into the future or onto the screen that weren't consistent with the rest of or the entirety of his experience. And so I went on this journey over the course of a couple years to really hone in on my true self. Who is my true self? And they were called the Year of True Form. There was the Year of True Form Part 1 and the Year of True Form Part 2. And this series in some ways is a result of that. So the lesson for this video here that I really want to get across to start with is this idea of ego. Ego is a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. It is what you believe about yourself to be important. It is that somebodyness that you are trying to become. It is that version of yourself on the screen that you project onto that Instagram post or some other place. So people look at a picture and they think that person must be perfectly happy because that's the projection that seems to be coming through. But the reality is that an over-focus on our ego is a big crux, a negative thing in our ability to actually create change in the world and actually become who we want to be. As I think about this in my own life, and I think about the gifts that I've been given, and I think this is true for everyone, and I just want to sort of lay this out there as well, right? I am a person of faith. I believe that the gifts that we've been given have come to us from God. I believe that they are things that we have been imbued with, that each of us has a gift, at least one, but probably multiple gifts. These are things that we can be great at, things that we can be leaders in, things that we can become masters of. And if we learn what those gifts are and we choose to hone them and use them in the world in the way that they could be used, we can have massive impacts on the people around us in terms of improving quality of life, in terms of improving outcomes for the world itself, and in terms of becoming who we really are. But one of the big things about this, right, this recognition here, is that a gift is actually not something that came from us. It's something that was given to us. And so in many ways, as we use that gift from God, it is our job to focus less on ourselves and our own sense of self-esteem and self-importance because of the gift that we have, but more on using the gift for the benefit of others and referring back to the source of the gift, right? Allowing that light to shine through so that what we are producing with it can become bigger than what it is by ourselves. All right, so this idea that we have gifts and that those gifts have been given to us by God, that those things are things that we need to hone in on, that we need to focus in on, is going to play a role in the rest of the series. And I think it'll be something that is useful as you continue to see how ego plays in these different ways into who we are. And I think that you'll also be surprised at some of the ways that it plays out in our lives. But the question I would have for you to start with is, how does your ego show up in life right now? What is it that you're doing that is a projection of yourself into the world? Where are you showing the world, hey, look at who I am, look at what I've done, where you're trying to become that somebody, establish yourself as a somebody? And so far, how have you felt about that action? How have you felt about the results of that action? Has it been something that you've resonated with positively, or has it been something that has always sort of eaten away at you as well? There are different aspects, as I said, to this ego piece, and it'll be interesting to place that into the rest of the conversation that we're going to have in future episodes. All right, that's what I've got for you today. If you're interested in learning more about ego and continuing to follow me on this journey as I talk about how it plays into social impact and how it plays into our lives, then join me tomorrow for the next episode of Social Impact Live. All right, I'll see you there.